Hey y'all, it's me Tiffany and welcome back to my channel. So this is the second part of 31 books in 31 days. I'm doing it this way just so I can talk a little bit more, and I didn't want like an extremely long video to talk about 31 books. So let's jump into it. So the first two I'm going to talk about are like one after the other, and yes, they're graphic novels. Dceased. So imagine if Stephen King and George Romano pinned up to write a horror-filled zombie apocalypse, and I feel like this is what you would get if they did it in graphic novel form. Okay, I'm just gonna say straight up, I don't think I did this in the last video. There's gonna be spoilers. I'm not gonna censor myself. So, in Dceased, Dark Side 1. So he did the anti-life virus thing, and he uploaded it into electronics and social media, and you know, I really liked that so many of our heroes died. I do. The only thing I did not like about these, especially the first one, I'm talking about the first one here, is I felt like a lot of our heroes' deaths weren't explored enough or given enough time for us to really feel the depth that is needed. But I like the fact that, you know, since this is not a canonical story and its own side thing, they just completely just killed so many people off. And I truly, truly like that. And the artwork is amazing in the first one. The second one, it's all right. But the first one, I really love the artwork. And I liked how they did Damian Wayne and John Kent, which is Superman's son, not his father, Jonathan Kent. I like what they do with those people as well. One thing I also liked about Dceased is, yes, it's nonstop action and very bloody, but there was like very nice comic relief throughout the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and go into Dead Planet. There are like little stories that are like side things that are in between these two, but I didn't feel like reading them, to be honest, and comics kind of do this anyways, right? So Dead Planet, this is like years after Dceased, and the world's, you know, insane. So Cyborg sends out like a distress signal, and he believes he has a way to get rid of the zombies and the virus. So maybe some of this sounds thin or far-fetched, but people are becoming zombies through social media, so you're just going to have to go along with it, right? And it's definitely a fun story. And one thing I liked about this in line with both books is basically every major villain and hero shows up at some point, but in Dead Planet, Constantine shows up and he basically becomes a big person to help co-lead the Justice League and help defend these zombies. And Constantine being in anything is always appreciated as someone who is a huge fan of John Constantine. And, you know, the story definitely goes along with like his mythos and whatever, right? You know, of course Swamp Thing is there because you can't have Constantine without Swamp Thing. So as I mentioned, John and Damian, I like what they did with them because in Dceased, they killed off Superman and Batman. Well, instead of just like, you know, staying like their own thing, they took up the mantles of their father. So, you know, Superboy becomes Superman and Damian becomes Batman. And they're adults at this point because this is years later. And I just really like the character growth for these. Sometimes, especially with Damian, he gets on my nerves in the comics, but I think they did him really well here. So I will say with Dead Planet, there are some cringy dialogue choices and some of the stuff feels a little rushed. But thankfully, this does not feel like just a straight up like this does not feel like a straight up cash grab. And I'm thankful for that. It kind of gave like a different perspective, but still paying homage to the first book, Dceased. And I really enjoyed these two so much. And I definitely recommend like you picking this up if you're like a zombie fanatic or you just want something a little different out of DC. So the second book I read was The Firekeeper's Daughter. This was 488 pages. And since I'm doing 31 books in 31 days, I had to supplement with the audiobook as well because sometimes I have to run errands or do other things, and whether you want to read this physically or listen to the audiobook, since I had experience with both are great options if font size matters. Like, it's not huge font, but it's still a nice size font, and as long as, I think like, I don't know if other people care, but I do care about font size. So it's not overly big, but it's nice. The format's nice, whether they have like text or emails or something. Like the format's nice. It's not overly crowded or doing too much, and for me. And the audiobook was produced well. So whichever option you want to pick up, I definitely would, because this was a heart-wrenching story, and there's murder, drug trafficking, and there's a lot of stuff you can learn culturally through this. I like the fact that there's a couple of tribes mentioned, even though it's mostly focused on our main character's tribe. And this is up in Michigan, and she's biracial. Her mom is white, and her father is Native American. She is active in her father's tribe. Even though her father did not sign the birth certificate, she still learns the history, and she even teaches the history in the beginning of the book. And the way, at least in America, I don't know how Canada does their First Nation reservations and stuff, but, there's blood quantums and there's a lot of stuff that goes with that, right? But since her father did not sign the birth certificate, she's not registered to be in the tribe. But thankfully, she's still allowed to be somewhat active, and she is at least allowed to know what tribe. And, she teaches us a lot, because in the beginning of the book, there is a new boy, and she walks around the tribe, and she teaches history, and and it's like a clever way to teach us about different tribes. And the boy who is new, he's Cherokee, which is a different tribe. And I like the fact that this book doesn't show Native Americans as a monolith. There is a multitude of tribes. They all have their own customs and their own history. And that's one thing I truly loved about this book, especially being in a YA setting. Like, a lot of people just think of Native Americans as one huge thing, and they're not. There are, like I said, many different tribes with their own histories and customs. So the new guy, Jamie, he has a lot of secrets and stuff, and somebody close to our main character gets hurt, and a lot of those secrets come out, and our main character is really smart and brave, and she uses her knowledge to kind of help with the investigation, which may seem unrealistic because of her age, but I think they handled it very well in this story. And, it's a bit of mystery and science in it. And I don't know, I really like the way the author did this. It didn't feel like, no, that really couldn't have happened. But I didn't question it while reading it. Because, it's the teenage girl helping the FBI, and yeah, like, when it comes to mystery, I don't want to go too much into the story plot lines, because with mysteries, once you find out stuff, it kind of ruins the whole book. But if you have the time to read this, I definitely would recommend this as well. Like, there is so much, there's so many layers, the characters are great, and they all feel fleshed out and believable. So as long as you don't mind like a teenage girl helping out the FBI, I would pick this up. And yeah, like I said, audiobook or physical. And look at how beautiful this cover is. Like, it's absolutely beautiful. Even the back is beautiful. I love it. Okay, so like the last video, I mentioned that I read 2 of the 4 books I was going to read for this next video I'm doing. And I guess it's like a series, and it's like time traveling through books or something, but there's no name for the actual series. But I've read like the 1900s, 1910s, and 1920s. So I'm working on the 1930s, and I read the next 2 books that are going to be of the 4 books for the 1930s one. So I'm going to talk about those more in their own separate video, but I am going to mention them here. We got Johhny got his gun, and then we got The Grapes of Wrath. And just for a short synopsis, Johhny Got His Gun is basically about World War I, even though it's interesting because this is a very strong anti-war novel. He loses his limbs and his vision. He can't really talk, but his mind is still completely functional. He can't see. is a very miserable existence and he's going insane. And this is a very, very haunting book. And you may have heard of this if you're a Metallica fan, but even if you're not, I definitely would make sure you're in the right mindset if you're going to pick this up. But if you are, especially if you're anti-war, I was surprised how much I enjoyed this. So the second one, The Grapes of Wrath. Like, I mentioned in the other, like, the older book series, with like the 1900s, 1910s, I was trying to do books that I've never read before. This is an exception. I've read this in high school, like my 11th grade year. I had a research paper on it. Absolutely hated it. But a personal challenge I've been doing for myself for a couple of years now is just with my high school books, not with the books I've like read in college, but any book that I read that was like separate and not in those like Norton anthologies and the Shakespeare plays. I wanted to reread them as an adult to see if I felt any differently. And this was on the list. I've been putting this off and I decided, it's my video. I can do what I want. So I reread this for that. And maybe I should have put this book off until after the 31 books in 31 days. Like, it's a longer book too. It's about 454. Okay, it's 454 pages, which I've read other books in this challenge that were about that length. But The Grapes of Wrath is very slow paced. It's about like during the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, and farmers are having to move to California in wagons, and it's a long, dangerous journey. It's very sad, very slow pace, very depressing. And maybe I should have read this like not in the challenge because it was hard for me to keep going, especially when I originally read it, I did not like this at all. But I did finish it, and I had to supplement with this audiobook as well. To be honest, I just kind of sped up the audiobook and listened to it a little faster because reading this, just like in high school, was a very slow read. I did appreciate this more, though, than I did in high school. I didn't hate it as much, but I will talk about this more in another video because I have a lot of thoughts on this. But, yeah, if you like John Steinbeck, then I guess you'll like this, but this is a depressing read. So the next one is also a reread for me, but this had nothing to do with school or any challenges. I just felt like rereading this because, yeah, I liked it when I first read it when I was like 17, and it is Peter Pan. Look how cute this edition is. Like, it's like a chalkboard. I love it. It has like the little old-timey pages. Very cute edition. So we know the story of Peter Pan, right? I will say this, I know the Disney version has similar issues, but I think it's a little more apparent in the book version of the racism towards Native Americans, the sexism, and the book definitely has a lot more violence in this. I still enjoyed this book. I did. And honestly, reading this older, I never really noticed, like, especially like the sexism that's in Peter Pan. Like, I just straight up never thought about sexism in Peter Pan until I reread this. And then I watched the Disney movie. I'm like, it's kind of there too. Basically with like Wendy not being given like a powerful voice, and she's basically just kidnapped to be like a mommy figure to clean and fix boo-boos and, whatever, right? But I still think it was a fun story. But keep in mind, those are there. It seems like a lot of these children classics have so many problems. And I mean, I guess almost any classic would, adult or children. But, it hits you a little differently, I guess, in children books, But I knew the Native American thing going into this. So I wasn't like flabbergasted as I was like Dr. Dolittle or The Secret Garden. So one thing about this that's different than the Disney movie is Peter Pan is more selfish, more forgetting, and he just doesn't give a damn about Wendy or the Lost Boys, to be quite frank. He doesn't care if he gets them killed. He just wants to have a good time. And I don't think Peter Pan is a hero, but I don't necessarily call him a villain either. He's just he can't comprehend death and his consequences because he just has like the worst memory, and he can't comprehend like the consequences of his actions. He's young, and that's it. Definitely shows up. He's super selfish. He's very cunning. He does whatever he needs to get what he wants, no matter kind of who gets hurt. And it's definitely like done, like it's watered down a bit in the Disney version, but in the book you're just gonna be like, I don't know if I like Peter. And like Tinkerbell is a little selfish and jealous in the movie, but she's definitely relentless in this as well. But she has like, I love how she just calls Peter like a little ass all the time. Like, I just think that was funny. And I could definitely see why people say that Peter Pan is like a celebration of childhood and wonder and excitement and imagination. Because it is those things. It is. But it's also like a critical look, or at least this is how I perceive it. It's like a critical look about children and their mindsets if they were just left alone and not shown compassion, not shown what leadership should be, or because kids don't comprehend a lot of things. And if you were to leave them alone with like, I don't want to say no training, but no discipline, no guidance, I think it's a criticism of that. And it kind of gives it like an extra flair that I didn't get the first time I read this. It's a very quick read. And if you have not read this classic, be aware it is problematic, but it's also enjoyable. Okay, so earlier this month I read Iraqi Girl, and it was an anonymous blog journal, like hybrid thing. For several years during the war in Iraq and this young girl's experience as a teenage girl. So I read another young girl's diary from a wartime in Iraq, and this goes from like March 2003 through December 2003. So this is a lot shorter of a span. It is a quick read. This was like an actual journal, like she wrote in it, and there are photos, kind of like the other one, but this one, like, since it's not anonymous, it has photos of like her and her family. I'm not gonna like give like a plot line of her entire life because it kind of, or at least her life that's presented in this journal, because it kind of, with some stuff kind of like mysteries, I don't know if that would like be the way to talk about this. This was a very honest account. She, like the other one, their views kind of wave a little differently, which is understandable. You grow, you learn more things. And I love the fact that also in this one, she talks about different aspects. And if you can read both, I would. They're definitely very different points of view, and their family dynamics different. And if you only know like the American or like the American side of the war in Iraq, I would definitely pick this up. And it's just like a really honest account, and I would definitely take your time reading this, like slower than I would. And yeah, like there's like even, it's cool, like she even has like a map in the beginning of the book, and there is a timeline of like the events that happened in the war of Iraq in 2003 in particular. And if you are not used to terms or maybe like the cities and stuff, there is like a glossary to help you out. I think this book would make a really great like discussion if you were like a teacher or something and you were teaching like the war in Iraq. I think this one would do a really great job to dissect and discuss. So yeah, pick this up if you can. And if you can pick up Iraqi Girl, I would definitely I would want you to read both, because they're both from like Iraqi sides, but they're both like, they're both different because they're different people with different lives, different experiences in different cities. So yeah, try to pick up both if you can. Okay, so the next book I read was definitely interesting. It was uniquely written. And I want to say that this isn't like a chapter by chapter story series of events like most novels. It's kind of written in sort of a short story way, but you do have to read these stories in order, and they are all centered around the same person. So I don't want to call it short stories because they do go in series of events, but they don't flow like back to back like a traditional novel. So The Red Island House. This is about a woman named Shay. She is African American and she lives in Italy. She meets her new husband, Sina. He's Italian, and they live in Milan, and they take a vacation in Madagascar in this house villa thing that Sina made called the Red House. And the way she navigates her feelings, because she becomes, woman of the house, and she is African American and the servants are black. And seeing how she feels and navigates between like racism, sexism, classism, like just because like, she has lived in America, she's dealt with things in America, but then she's experiencing Madagascar, and she even thinks about things in Italy, and the way her mindset goes, and she's exploring these thoughts, and she is how she is in her beliefs. It makes a very compelling read. It compares and like contrasts a lot of different things, and I like how much culture of Madagascar that is in this, because Madagascar is one of those places that becomes very fetishized, and she does this in a way that breathes life and breathes like realness and authenticity. Like, well, I haven't been to Madagascar, but it feels like a real place. It doesn't feel romanticized. It doesn't feel fetishized. It tells a lot of truth, and it definitely makes you want to look up more customs about Madagascar. And yeah, I definitely recommend this. It feels like there is a certain surrealness but grounded feeling by the way this author writes, and it's hard to explain, but this is a phenomenal book. I definitely recommend this. It'll give you a different perspective on things. And I think this book will help your mind grow in a fictional format, which is nice. Like, we all want to learn, and sometimes we don't want to read nonfiction books. And I think this will make your mind grow a lot. The last book that I'm going to mention in this video, because as I mentioned in this video and the last one, I'm doing this video in 3 parts, so the videos aren't super long and, easier to edit. It's another graphic novel. It's DC, Batman-centric, called Batman Damned. This is not in the main line. This is also like its own little thing. And, so I will say one positive about this is the artwork is amazing. There is no denying that. The artwork is absolutely gorgeous. And if you get like the hardback edition of this, it is censored in the individual issues when it first came out. You do see Bruce Wayne's member, which means a lot of scalpers went nuts, but they censored it in this. And Batman is injured, and he doesn't remember stuff of the night before. The Joker, being the Joker, people are killed. He's trying to navigate things, and John Constantine is there to help him, but John Constantine never makes makes anybody's life any easier. And being like, this is so heavily John Constantine and Swamp Thing in this, I figured I would love this more, but it feels like there was no substance in this. The Joker might be dead, and I think it's interesting. You see the turmoil that Batman's going through, trying to navigate what even happened, what's going on. Trenches is in this. John Constantine. There's a lot of spiritual, supernatural stuff happening. Gotham is Gotham. There's a lot of pain, but like, I like the fact that I've never seen Bruce Wayne go through so many emotions. And it had a lot going for it, but I don't know if it's just because it was 3 issues, or the writing felt kind of like, it just felt rushed. It felt like I feel like a story like this needs more for it to have real substance. And this fell flat for me. It felt like it was just trying to be edgy more than giving you a compelling story. And, That's not my thing. But the artwork is phenomenal. This was a fail. And I absolute hate the way that Harley looked in this. Harley Quinn looks kind of bad in this, in my opinion. But the rest of the artwork is amazing. It is a short read. It's only 3 issues. Would I recommend this? I don't know. But guys, that is it for this video. If you've read any of these, let me know in the comment section below. If you want to read these, let me know. If you've done this challenge, just hit me up. Or if you want to see me like talk about anything, let me know too. And we can have a good conversation. See you later, guys.